Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming Bethany Ricks to the show. Bethany is a distinguished senior business executive with an award-winning career spanning more than 2 decades. Throughout her impressive tenure, she's made significant contributions to companies with peak valuations of $20 billion, leading multi-generational global teams. Her career has been dedicated to strategic development and empowering individuals to achieve their best next. In 2021, Bethany was honored for the second time by the National Diversity Council as one of the top 100 African Americans in business. After a successful career and the end of a 10-year marriage, Bethany pivoted to focus on speaking and writing. As a sought-after speaker and business consultant, she is celebrated for her profound insights on overcoming struggles, the transformative power of faith, and the strength found in perseverance. Bethany's mission to help others navigate life's valleys, uncovering the valuable lessons within instead of bypassing them. Her powerful book, Face Forward, Reclaiming Hope When Everything Falls Apart, billed as a transformative way of leadership grounded in the power of resilience and faith, came out in October. Woo, that was a mouthful, but I loved saying all of it. Welcome. It's so amazing to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much for having me. I tell you, if I ever have a bad day, I should just have someone
Read it.
read that.
Yeah.
So long ago.
Keep that copy close by, just in case.
Yes.
We never know how any day is going to go.
Exactly.
Well, it's always, I think with every episode, we are so privileged to have an incredible collection of creatives and writers and leaders such as yourself who on paper have these just astonishing credentials. And then here you are, you accepted our invite. You wanted to be on. Surely you don't have anything to contribute to this imposter conversation.
Nothing at all. It was all so easy.
Yeah.
I was confident the entire time.
Well, maybe the best place to start, because I think, your book is so powerful in that it's confessional, it's candid, and it also is incredibly motivating and inspirational, which, I think one can beget the other if it's done right. And you've really done it right. But what I was so struck by is it also reads like a thriller at moments. You have incredible moments of drama and peril and, really kind of white-knuckled moments. So could you maybe start there and tell us how you were prompted on this journey to write this book?
That's a great question. I was prompted because I was tired of reading surface level self-help and leadership books. In my profession, which an HR professional, I spent most of my career, so 18 years in brick and mortar space. All of these books being sent to me around how to communicate better, how to lead better, how to prioritize, how to do all these things to make your professional and personal life better, but they lacked honesty and depth, right? It was like, if you do 1, 2, and 3, everything will be better and you'll make more money. And often I would find myself personally conflicted, and I would watch the people who I worked with also dealing with personal conflict and professional conflict. And so I decided I'm just going to get real honest about what it's like to live on the hamster wheel called life and called success. Because in the book, I'm talking about all these things that are very difficult, but I'm simultaneously making 7 figures, right? So I'm holding 2 things at one time, and I'm inviting the reader into that.
Yeah.
There's also, sorry, Liz, where are you going to?
You go.
Well, I was just going to say, to your point about sort of in my experience at least, that the kind of self-help space, one of the things that I think you do so beautifully in this book is there's also a lot of self-accountability, which I think is not always the case. And coming in from a reading perspective, that really like invests the reader immediately. when it's like there's like a sort of a culpability, and you're actually really processing a lot of your own stuff throughout this piece as well. Did you know going in, did you kind of maybe recognize the importance of that on the way into this project of like really tackling that stuff right up front?
Yes, it was actually a part of my pitch.
Okay.
I was when I was talking to my publisher, I told them, I said, there are certain topics, specifically in the boundaries chapter. I think I really went there
Yeah.
where I said, I want to talk about where I got it wrong as a
Mhm.
leader.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times I'm at the mountaintop and here are all the things I did right. And if you do it like me, you too will
Right.
be amazing like me. But I actually sucked a lot. I did. I was trying to figure it out. I was given really big titles and really big jobs by my late 20s. And it does not mean that in my youth I was not capable. I was capable, but I was fumbling.
Mhm.
Um, and in the fumbling, I had a lot of self-doubt and I had a lot of insecurity. And the thing about self-doubt, it thrives on you not having confidence. And so I really made a lot of communication mistakes, talent mistakes, etc. And I wanted to be honest about that and not hide behind that, which would have been very easy for me to do. So I took the hard road.
What I would love to know, because this was, one of the things I loved in your book, is how you use that kind of accountability and looking at those like fumbles or mistakes, whether it was in work or relationships and, in life in general, and then how you can kind of use that experience moving forward, this idea of moving forward.
Yeah, I'm really big on people understanding that their past doesn't define them.
Mm-hmm.
And so when people initially meet me or they understand parts of what I did, there is, oh, I'm impressed. And so I use that in the book to the reader's advantage, not necessarily to mine, but to the reader's advantage of, before you're impressed, look at my past so you can see how I got here. And it's not my past per se that has it's the resilience that has helped me
Mm-hmm.
along the way, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the key message there, that your past doesn't define you, but it's the resilience. Because I've made a lot of mistakes. My mistakes are not defining me, but the resilience and my ability to overcome and my ability to get up again, my ability to lean on my community, those are the things that have defined me, and helped me kind of just be a better person, a better human being.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a core message throughout.
To sort of build off of that point, there's some really, I mean, I love a lot of the phrasing you use in this and a lot of things. I found myself with this book, with Face Forward, looking at things in a new way, things that I think about often, right? Because of the way you're able to kind of frame them, delineate them, give them sort of a new context. And so I have a number of things, but kind of to the point you were just talking about, there's this great part that I love that I'd love to quote. It's you talk about reverting to rhythms and sound bites that are painful but bring the ease of familiarity. And I
Yeah.
love that so much. And it's something, again, that I think about all the time, of that sort of rub between the, getting, like, not getting out of ruts because the familiarity sort of, maybe outshines the amount of discomfort that would be required to make a pivot or a change. And I wonder,
Yeah.
like, what was it that kind of brought that bit of enlightenment to you? How did you kind of like learn that lesson?
One of the things I talk about in the book is how our comfort zone
Right.
isn't free. And so what I found myself in is this comfort
Mm-hmm.
loop, because I also talk about circles, right? So circles are dangerous because you're really not going anywhere,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I had an epiphany because I was just doing the same thing every day. And though it was comfortable and familiar, it was in no way beneficial to me, my health or me mentally. I was just following along. I was following along with the people who I admire. I was following along because that's just the thing you do. You're like, okay, well, I have this job, and so I do this thing. Um, and it was really the health scare, if I'm being honest. Because there's nothing. I'm going to say this, and when I say this, people roll their eyes, but there's nothing uniquely special about me in my mind that I woke up one day and had this aha moment and I said, "Oh my god, I'm in a loop. Things are so familiar, I need to change." No, I am very ambitious and I almost had a stroke.
Mm.
So that kind of pushed me back a little bit to say, "Whoa,
Right.
the
Well,
status quo's not working."
and you were under 30, is that right?
When I had the TIA, I was 30, 35, 36. I
Wow.
was 27, 28 when I became a vice president.
Wow. Well, one of the things that really struck me that I personally identified with heavily was this, incredible drive and ambition you had against a lot of odds,
A lot of
a
odds.
lot
Yeah.
of odds. And you talk about some of those, which I'd love to get into, but,
Yeah.
I worked my way up to VP. I wasn't quite as young as you. You were in your mid 20s in an industry that I really loved, but had some, issues with. Got my way up to the top and realized that it was not where I wanted to be and things were kind of rotten. And, that's really where my imposter syndrome started to kick in professionally. But I also realized it was making me sick,
Mm,
mentally, physically, spiritually. I was, subverting a lot of my own needs and values. There were a lot of things that you talked about, where on the face of things, they looked really good.
yeah.
You had a high salary, you had a high position, you were in a marriage, you had a beautiful family and life, but that was not matching your insides.
Right.
And it was kind of a watershed point. So this medical crisis happens,
Yeah.
and then it seems like that really kind of starts you in a different line of thinking. And then let's not discount, your faith in all of this is really important in your life and in the book. Do you want to talk a bit about how you kind of come to where you are today? I know it's gradual and an evolution.
It was gradual and an evolution. I think I had the health scare, and you know, before that, I went through my divorce. I was married for 10 years, and I was very angry with God. Which is how that scene opens in the book. There was a lot of anger there, and unanswered questions that I had. And so between that scene and the hospital scene, there were a lot of years. That was not months. That was years, at least 4.
Wow.
Um, and so that in and of itself was a journey. I was very I was just very distant and kind of detached, right? Um, but then there was this pause and this reckoning of not listening to my body, right? There were signs there. Stress produces signs. And then just in that hospital bed, when you have nowhere else to lean,
Mhm.
we revert back to what we know and what we believe. And for me, other people have their own beliefs, but for me, I reverted back to what I believed in that hospital room by myself.
Mhm.
And so that brought comfort, and I kind of, started leaning harder and harder and harder on my faith. And that gave me the strength to make a huge pivot, which
Mhm.
was, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have enough,
Mm.
and I want to write, and I can do this, and I want to help women, and take all of this knowledge that I have and pour that out and be at home with my kids and actually experience motherhood in a different way, and not in passing. And so that's a little bit of what that journey looked like
Mm.
in terms of the faith the faith piece.
Had the writing piece of that, had that been a passion of yours before that? Was that something you would ever sort of, entertain the idea of doing before this big kind of life happening? Or was this like a big...
Yeah. If my mother were here, she would say, Bethany's been writing since she was
Okay.
5.
Right.
So I will share something that I have never shared with anyone on your
We're on.
podcast. Um, I won a poetry award when I was 17 years old, a National Poetry Award.
Oh, wow.
Oh gosh. And I still have the trophy in the storage. I'm sure it's very rusted. It was like one you had to mail in, because I'm almost 42.
Okay.
So this would have been back in like 1999 or something like that.
Right.
It's when like the who's who of whatever. Like, do you guys remember that?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
so I placed and got like a trophy, and I'd always told myself I'd write a book. And then in 2020, when we were all in our homes, I self-published a poetry book, because in all of my traveling, I'd be on these planes by myself and I would be writing. And I just have journals and journals of poetry books. And so, yeah, it was always there. And it was something I thought I would do in my 50s, because I had a goal. I was going to retire at 45, get a beach house, kids would go off to college, and then I would write a book after all my reading. But I just did it a little sooner than what I expected.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like all of your circumstances just pushed you in this direction faster.
Yeah, but much faster. And I never thought I would write anything about my life
Hmm.
at all. So that was kind of a surprise.
Well, I think and I like that we're kind of being obscure with specifics about the book for the listener, because I don't want to give away too much. And I also like in the book that you write it a little bit non-linearly, so it's each story is critical to kind of the lesson, for lack of a better word, but
Yeah.
we get, kind of the whole of this big section of your life, and it makes sense that you're a poet because there's a lot of poetry in your storytelling. One of the things that, struck me is that you did it out of sequence in some ways. Were you intentional in that? Like, how do you, just kind of from a structural point of view, when you were sitting down, did you have in mind how you wanted things to unfold?
I wanted to do it out of order, because too much was happening in my life to do it in order, and I was doing it by topic. And so I picked the topics and then picked the different stories, whether they be professionally or personally, that best aligned with the topic, and kind of went from there. But I definitely did not want to do it in order, because I didn't necessarily want it to be about me. And had I done it in sequence, it would have became more about, okay, what was going on in this time of my life, and the message would have been lost, because I want to be authentic and I want to be truthful. So then I would have been racking through my mind around, okay, well, if I'm going to talk about this, then now I have to find a topic that fits this story in this timeline in 2018.
Right.
And I also wanted really engaging, stories too, and certain things that just kind of like, wait, whoa, what is this? What is this story? Like, I like it, but like, oh my gosh. Specifically the reclaiming your voice chapter is the one that people, towards the end, I did a trailer for it also. So I reenacted that particular chapter. So people really just were thrown by, they like it, but they were just thrown by that kind of narrative, that start of the chapter, because it was so different than every other start in the book.
I hope every listener is Googling right now for that trailer.
It is. It's right on my. It's on my IG page.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, you can go on and you can watch it. And yeah.
Well, to kind of flip it for a moment from reclaiming your voice, I'd love to ask you, and I'm realizing this is sort of two questions, so I'll ask them one at a time. But you dedicate which I thought was beautiful. You dedicate the book to your mentor, Denise, who,
Yes.
as you describe it, taught you to move in silence. And I would
Yeah.
love to know I'll ask the first question, which is, could you talk a bit about sort of the role of mentorship for you, the importance of it in your life and your development?
Oh gosh, it was
Yeah.
huge. So if I think about the first 10 years of my
Mhm.
career, where I fumbled and fell and tripped and made significant
Yeah.
mistakes, I had no mentorship or
Okay.
guidance. Now I did have people offering
Mhm.
it, but I was like, what are
Yeah.
you talking about? I don't need your help. Get
Okay.
out of here. So there was a little bit of that going on. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like I'll be
Sure.
honest here. But I really just did not have people who were vested in me beyond middle
Okay.
management because of just the environments I worked in. I was a Black woman. I do not have my master's
Mhm.
degree, and I do not have HR certifications. So the ceiling had already been
Right.
determined
Mhm.
Yep.
for me. Um, and then I met
Mhm.
Denise. And her willingness to invest in me, but also see my capability beyond what I could see was
Okay.
invaluable. And she taught me the things that you can't learn in a book and the things you can't learn in a
Yeah.
classroom, like moving in silence and things of that nature. Like she taught making decisions, making decisive decisions, um, knowing when to speak up, when to speak out, and when to leverage your authority and power, and what that
Yeah.
looks like without um, without severing
Okay.
relationship. You can't learn that on a PowerPoint presentation. You need someone who is well seasoned
Yeah.
beyond you to teach
Yeah.
you that.
Okay. And then the follow up as well. Yet another of these beautiful quotes of yours. I'm gonna lay this one out for the listeners. Silence holds a profound strength that often goes unnoticed in a world clamoring for constant noise. And I think
Yeah.
that that is so, all encompassing with everything now. And I've been thinking about it specifically. The timing is interesting with this interview because I've been thinking about it specifically this week. I don't know if you're a football fan, Bethany.
I'm a huge
Okay.
football fan.
So Eagles won the, Super Bowl. Jalen Hurts wins the MVP. And Jalen Hurts is one of
Yes.
these guys who he's a young guy. I'm in awe of his like comportment and his poise for a
Mhm.
young man his age, having to navigate a lot of choppy waters in his profession, in the world, in the, the kind of Monday morning armchair expert realm and all this kind of stuff. But he's someone who I always think about, he's someone who I think sits with his own silence very gracefully and finds a lot of strength in that. I think because of
Yeah.
his position and who he is, he gets a lot of backlash for that, right? There's always the pushback
Yeah.
of like, oh, he's detached, he's aloof, he's like all about himself, he's not a team guy. And I have to imagine
Mhm.
you being in the position that you were in probably would have faced a lot of that kind of pushback as well. So like what was I guess the journey for you to really become comfortable in that for yourself, if that makes sense as a question?
It was a rough journey because there was the pressure to be known in the
Mhm.
room, um, or to say it differently, to make sure that people knew I was
Yeah.
in the room and that I deserved to be
Mhm.
in the room. Uh, and I would be called out. So this wasn't like something that was in my head. It was a little bit of, why are
Right.
you here? If you're not saying anything, then why are you here? So there was a mixture of that, and then there was the balance of, but I don't have anything to
Yeah.
say. And so that was a tough road. And then finally, I came to the place of I don't have to
Mhm.
respond. And sometimes I do have something of value to say, but it's just not the time because it's not going to be
Mhm.
received. And that is emotional intelligence. That is self-awareness of knowing you actually do have something of value to say, but the person who's going to be listening, they're not in a place to receive it. That is
Yeah.
wisdom.
Yeah.
So that's where the silence is also
Yeah.
wisdom. Like, I don't have to respond right now. I can
Yeah.
respond later. Um, but again, it was a journey, and it was a little bit of Denise teaching me also, and me watching her through observation. Because if you are talking, you are not observing. You cannot do two things at one time. So you got to pick, which one do you
Right.
want to do? Do you want to talk smack, or do you want to observe and
Right.
learn? Because we may think we can, but we actually cannot. It is
Yeah.
impossible. I will go on the record and say that.
Mm.
So I just decided to listen and observe and learn before I went into the lane of speaking and leading and telling people to follow me.
Yeah.
I mean, the hindsight now and all of the wisdom that you've gleaned and shared in the book, it almost sounds like you've been this wise all along. And I know that's not what you're saying, but it's always good to remind ourselves that like it took a lot to get to where we are, to have the experience and the wisdom and what it makes me wonder about is where was the kind of imposter syndrome in this part of your life for you? I mean, if at all, but you're in your 20s, you're a VP, and are you feeling imposter syndrome or are you kind of impervious to it?
Oh, I'm absolutely feeling it.
Yeah.
Every day, because I was often told I'm not supposed to be
Mhm.
here. And so there are the seeds of doubt that we plant ourselves, and then there are the ones that other people
Mhm.
plant.
Hmm.
Um, and I was having probably in my late 20s, and even now, I have a really difficult time of the voices of other people can get really, really loud when your confidence is weak.
Hmm.
And my confidence would get weak when I do new things. Right? So when I became a vice president of HR, okay, I became a vice president because I was doing a really good job in the space of general human resources. But then I was promoted into mergers and acquisitions. I'd never done that before. So my confidence is down, and I'm being judged for every decision. Oh my gosh, I'm not supposed to be here. Fast forward, I decide to leave my big time executive job where I've gotten all of these awards and all these things, and I've decided to write a book, a nonfiction book, in a space that's really loud and has a lot of people,
Hmm.
and in a faith forward space. It's a faith forward book. There aren't a lot of people who look like me. Okay, every day. Oh my gosh, should I be doing this? What am I doing? Why did I leave? Like, I had a quarter office. What am I doing? So, self doubt thrives when in spaces where our confidence is negotiable.
Mm.
And so that's when it shows up for me. When I'm in spaces where my confidence becomes negotiable and I've got to nip it quickly. Because if I don't, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, those voices get loud.
Before Greg, sorry, I want to just have you expand on that because I think there's probably, and I know there is because I've read the book, the practical takeaway when someone is in that moment, when those voices, whether they're external or internal, how do you switch? How do you switch into finding your kind of confidence overriding that imposter feeling?
Um, for me, who decides? Who's the decider? Which voice is deciding?
Hmm.
And I have the gift of remembering. So I will very quickly pull back from a pattern, not remembering one thing. If you've done it before, you can do it again. So I establish a pattern in my head. So I've been successful before in X, Y, and Z. I can do it again. And I was successful there because I did X, Y, and Z. And I am an effective communicator. And people have told me that they enjoy reading the words that I write. And I have, then you you create kind of a new loop in your head. So that's what I do. It's the remembering and deciding who are you going to listen to? What voice are you going to listen to? Which one?
Mhm.
You
Hmm.
mentioned, I,
Thank you.
I thought you had a really interesting take on imposter syndrome actually in the book where you address, and it's a little bit, it's not necessarily the case that we normally are discussing with people on this podcast, but in your case, it's almost like a reverse imposter syndrome in that like you mentioned that a lot of your kind of I guess discomfort came from not only your assessment of your skills, but anticipating what the reaction was going to be from the people around you because of who you are in
Oh,
that space. And so I wonder, and I'm sure that had to be its own thing to navigate. So I'd love to hear a bit about that, but I'm also curious now. It sounds like you're saying that when you transferred over to being a writer in those spaces, that there was a little bit of that as well. And I wonder, did you navigate it in each space sort of differently? Did you tailor your approach? Was it sort of the same uphill climb initially?
I want to make sure I'm understanding your. I think I'm understanding your question. I think. Can you ask
Well,
it?
I know how from the book. I mean, you speak about how you had that added layer of sort of again not only your own self doubt, but then anticipating all the people around you and how they were going to perceive you. I'm wondering, and it
Yes.
sounds like just from the little you talked about moving into the book space that there was a bit of that as well. So I'm wondering
Yes.
if they were similar, and if it's because it's sort of two different industries, are you kind of navigating that the same way, or are you kind of like pivoting and switching up your approach?
So I'm navigating it the same way, but I'm also, the beautiful thing about being, I'm self aware. I know what my strengths are and I know what my gaps
Okay.
are. And one of the things about being a writer is I can't bring old voices into new
Mm,
spaces.
yeah.
So some of what I'm navigating is I have to make sure that I'm not imposing old noise into the new things that I'm
Nice. Yeah.
doing. And the way that I combat that is I'm surrounded by really strong authors and writers who've been doing this for a really long
Mm,
time. And if I am feeling as though, if I'm just feeling
yeah.
down, I just tell them like, I'm not really sure. Like, what are you thinking? Give me some feedback, give me your thoughts. And so I'm pretty open and transparent with this kind of what I'm doing right now with people who I trust and who I'm willing to be vulnerable with. I really only had Denise in the corporate world just because when you're dealing with corporate spaces and politics and all of those things, there aren't a lot of
Okay.
people who you can who you can who you can trust, which is what made it such a pressure cooker because you're constantly charging up a hill while simultaneously looking over your
Mm,
shoulder.
Yes.
And you are at some point going to stumble. It's just when, where, how, and in front of
right.
who.
Right.
Mm.
So you've been able to find more of a sort of a sustained community in the writing space. Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm.
Which is, I love that. Authors and writers are just such beautiful, beautiful people, especially when you find a powerful group of men and women who really enjoy writing and enjoy reading. And it's so different than
Yeah.
business. That's
Yeah.
for sure. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
I was really struck when I left my 20-year career to write full time how I didn't have the, kind of ulcerative anxiety every Sunday night or every Wednesday night because I always had a huge marketing meeting on Thursdays or just like the amount of physical anxiety that manifested when I worked in business versus
Yeah.
becoming a writer. And, that's maybe not everyone else's experience, but the running uphill while looking over your shoulder really hits me.
Yes.
And, but that said, I will maybe talk out of school for a minute on this very intimate podcast. One of the things that I worked on in my 20 years in book publishing was I worked on a lot of self-help.
Mm.
And I worked with some very, very big self-help authors. And And unlike other writer genre communities where it's very nurturing and supportive and, collegial, these are big personalities and they
Oh
want to
yeah.
be number one. And there's a lot of competition. And as you mentioned, there are not a lot of self-help writers who are women at the top of the game or of color or
Yep.
fill in the blank. It's a lot of kind of one kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm wondering, and this is a multi-part question, but what was your publishing journey like, finding an agent, getting published, given those obstacles? And then once you're there and you clearly belong here, how has it been when you've encountered other people in this space, other writers in this space? Have they been supportive, collegial, and to the extent of what you can say comfortably?
Oh, are you kidding? Are you kidding? Oh, I'm going to answer honestly. So the first part of your question, my agent Trinity reached out to me on Instagram, and
Nice.
she said, "I want to sign you."
Mm.
Love
I had
Trinity.
there was no process. I, there was no I didn't pitch to her or anything. She was like, "Your poetry is beautiful." This is when my Instagram page was just poetry. She was like, "Your poetry is beautiful, and the bindery wants to sign you." And I said, "Oh, okay." I was like, "I don't know what I want to write about." She's like, "That's fine. We'll figure it out." So that was in 2021. I had left the corporate space. It was like a few months after I'd left the corporate space. And I put a proposal together about perseverance. We started pitching it. And as the offers came in, I said I didn't like it.
Mm.
And we pulled it.
Okay.
Trinity, I hope she hears this because I'm just telling all the business. She was not that she was like, we don't usually. I said, "This isn't the book.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't the book." And so we pulled it, and I put together this book, and I said I want it to be about resilience and helping people get around the wall they keep hitting, and this is what I want it to be about. And so we pitched again. And, there were a couple of publishing houses that were like, it's not faith enough. Or could you be more like X, Y, and Z? God, we think you're
Mhm.
great. We think you're
Mhm.
great. If you could just, and I'm like, I don't do boxes.
Mm.
I don't do
Yep.
boxes.
Yeah.
Sorry. And then Zondervan Reflective, I received several offers, but Zondervan Reflective with HarperCollins came, and they've just been phenomenal. And in part, it's because they just let me be, let me try, let me, do all the things, and they've been a wonderful partner. In terms of, other authors in the space, I'm a little scary. I'm
Yeah.
different. I'm different. I say the quiet part out
Mhm.
loud. I'm very unapologetic. Um, I love, I love God. I love people, and I don't do machines. So I'm not, I'm kind of like, and I'm just very honest about the things that we go through as people below the surface.
Mm.
You know
I
what I
love
mean?
that.
So I
Yeah.
don't really care about my account being at 125,000 people. Could I do that? Sure. But really, I want to talk to Susan from Minnesota, who is really, really struggling on a Tuesday and wants to be seen. And she wants someone to just write something where she can just connect at 9 o'clock at
Yeah.
night.
Mm.
And that's what I'm going
Yeah.
to do.
Mm.
That's beautiful.
That's really scary for people.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of that fear, I mean, firstly, I just want to say, hats off, because I don't think that every debut author is necessarily going to have both the confidence and clarity to be passing on stuff and just being like, "That's not the book." I think a lot of people are going to, we'll square peg
Make it
work,
work.
make this the book work, and you're like, no. So right off the bat.
Yeah.
And let me ask you another question that spoke to me from the book itself. You talk about, and this to me, it speaks to faith. It speaks to sort of self assuredness. It speaks to that centeredness that you're talking about and alluding to now. But this idea of living in the now and not yet.
Yeah.
If you could just talk a bit more about that for our listeners, because I just love that kind of
Being
yeah,
present. Being present, and which sounds really trendy, but it's really
yeah,
hard.
yeah.
And focusing on what's happening around you and not being so focused on what's happening around the corner, because you can't see around the corner
Mhm.
anyway. You can't see around the corner
Yeah,
anyway. And who knows what's going
right.
to happen. And so I really want people to take control of their life. And in order to do that, you have to engage in the present, no matter how much it
Right.
sucks. It
Yeah.
might suck. It actually might suck. I'm not saying that your present is rainbows and sapsucking
Mhm.
unicorns. Um, it might suck, but I need you to engage um, right now
Mhm.
and not try and see what's around the corner. Your neck can't do
Mhm.
that. Your, your neck doesn't bend
Right.
that way.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's a little bit, I'm putting some humor on it, but that's what I want for the reader. And that's my hope. And that's why I put that
Yeah.
in there. A little more poetic than your neck doesn't do that.
You're not a giraffe. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that's my hope. That was my hope for that line, is the
Yeah.
takeaway.
You've mentioned a little bit about, and I love this, that you're way more interested in speaking to Susan in Minnesota, than you are about the metrics and the numbers, which, is, I think, really unique especially in the space you're in,
Mhm.
because it's so much about
So
numbers and
much.
audience and I'm wondering, what are you hearing back from people? And are you going out and doing speaking? Are you doing one-on-one? Like, how are you reaching and doing this service for people? Obviously you have the book, which is
Yeah.
amazing.
So they love the book. And I mean, me and my husband will be out and we will have people approach us in coffee shops, people who I do not
Mhm.
know, who, because of the top knot.
Mhm.
So the marketing works, right? They're like, "You're Bethany." And, or I'll just be out by myself and yes, I am. And they'll tell me that they read the book, or they'll even stop my parents.
Mm.
And because they know my dad and they know who he is, and they'll stop and just talk about how profound the book is, or I'll get DMs and things like that. I do speak. I speak at conferences and book clubs. I'm actually zooming in for a book club. They're reading Face Forward. I'm going to zoom in for that.
Mm.
They're out in California at the end of this month. So I am very high touch with readers. I think this is the type of book that, because I was not hardcore full court press for 2 weeks, that it just refuses to
Yeah.
disappear.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's touching the pulse of what people need over and over again, and they can just, you know what, I'm having a boundary issue. I want to talk about priorities. I need a pep talk, so I'm going to go to reclaim my voice. So it's one of those books that's allowing people to feel seen. And so those are the ways that I'm connecting with the
Mm.
readers. And then I remind people, on my social media, um, that about the book and the words from the book. So it's just staying alive, and I have some more media and things like that coming out. But I'm very
Mm.
proud of it, and
Mm.
I'm proud of it because, not because I wrote it,
Mhm.
but because it's just connecting with women and men, and I'm really happy
Yeah.
about that.
Well,
Mm.
speaking a
So
bit to that interpersonal thing and what you just talked about, you mentioned priorities, and you mentioned in the book you kind of delineate between priority versus obligation. Which I thought was really
yeah,
interesting, and that was something that I hadn't once again I hadn't put it into that wording, but as soon as you said it, I was like, oh yeah, right, right. Like that's such a deep thing, and it's so simple in a way in front of us, and yet it's something that we don't necessarily have a lot of clarity on. I feel like.
yeah. Which I what really brought me to that point was at this point, I was in single
Mhm.
motherhood, and I was really fumbling through trying to manage everything going on and
Yeah.
disappointing my young children not being able to make to events, soccer practice, um, work trips, and things like that. And so in my own life, I had to start saying in my head, like, okay, this is a priority and this is an obligation. And I started communicating it
Yeah.
that way.
Mm.
I have an
Right.
obligation. And when I started doing that, it would defuse people from asking me, inundating me with a ton of questions and solutions. First of all, I didn't ask
Right.
for,
Right.
and questions that are none of your business. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Because when you tell people, hey, I can't do this, I have a priority, what
Yep.
is it? Can you change it? But when you say something like, I have an obligation, I have
Mm.
a prior obligation, that's a little stronger
Yes.
language. And
Yeah.
it's like, oh, okay. And then I also started inviting my family into my schedule. My parents don't live very far. So I would tell them, like, I have this obligation. Can you step in? And it really has helped me streamline my life and just how I communicate with people.
Yeah.
Mm.
Really setting those boundaries and being concrete with those boundaries. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's amazing if we just make a simple word change, it stops people in their
Mhm.
tracks. Like, I have an obligation. But when you start saying priorities, because everybody says
Right. Right.
priorities, it's like a yellow flag. So it's like
Yeah.
a little bit of permission, like we can still
Yeah.
talk about it. I don't want to
Right.
talk about it. It's an
Right.
obligation.
Yeah. I mean, I think anyone who's listening who is struggling with boundaries needs to read your book because, I think that it's like death by a thousand paper cuts when you're
Ugh,
having boundary issues and it gets so unmanageable, and then not being able to say no as a complete sentence, not being able to say obligations, it really, especially if you're in a fragile state to begin with,
yeah.
and you talk about this kind of throughout in so many ways, but I'm just wondering for someone who's really struggling, I'm thinking about like the opening scene of your book is so powerful, and you're in the rain and all of these things are happening, and you open with the scene in the rain and you close with one which was just extraordinary. But what do you say to someone who's like out there in the squall of it all and really suffering? Like, where do they even start to kind of get back to themselves in the way that you were able to?
A part of getting back to the version of yourself that you want to get back to, because one, you have to decide what version of yourself you want to get back to, um, is you have to back away from the cliff of what if.
Mhm.
Mm.
That's a game that will keep you stuck and hostage. At least it did with me, because so you kind of have to turn that off. Um, the other part is you have to decide what forward looks like, and then you have to take one small step.
Mhm.
Mm.
And somebody's probably listening, like, you didn't answer my question. I did. I actually
Right.
did. I did answer your question. Um, but the reason I didn't fill in the blanks is because you, listener, have to be empowered for it to be sustainable.
Mhm.
And so you deciding what you can do and then doing it is proof that it can be done.
Mm.
Me deciding for you just means Bethany can do
Yeah.
it. It doesn't mean that Susan from Minnesota can do it. I have friends from Minnesota, so that's why I'm doing that. I am
You're
not
allowed to do
mocking.
that.
I'm allowed to do that. I'm not mocking. I have several friends who I adore from Minnesota. I love the state of Minnesota. It's a beautiful state. So that's why in the book I don't fill in a lot of blanks, because I'm not taking accountability for your life, but I am holding your
Mhm.
hand. I
Mhm.
am showing you how I screwed up and the things that
Yeah.
I tried. But if you want to be empowered and you want it to be sustainable and you want it to last beyond next Tuesday, you have to decide, and then you have to take one. I just said one step,
Mhm.
Mm.
just one. And then after the first, take the second, and I'll applaud you on the fifth step.
Mhm.
First step is hard. Number five, oh my God, that one's a
Yeah.
monster.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
I th- I think all of this in a way sort of funnels into this. And this is something that Liz and I talk about on like an interpersonal level, because I mean, the three of us are all creatives. We're all in the creative field. With the two of us, we're partners, creatively. So we're working together on things like that. And I think on a small scale and also on a large scale, when you look out in the world, I think ego is so much of everything. And I love the way you talk about in the book, there's a question that you ask is the ego leading the decision, or is it based in reality? How did you get to, how were you able to, I guess one has to get out of the way of their own ego to have the clarity to ask the question in a way, right?
Because my ego gets me into trouble all the time.
Yeah, that's what egos do.
Yeah, it's just like, hey, you're all that in a bag of chips. Well, keep on. You'll be sitting by yourself, alone, with scraped knees and bruised elbows because you keep falling on your face. But honestly, what did it for me is I was becoming unlikable.
Okay.
And I talk about it a little bit in the boundaries chapter. I was really passionate about this. My editor was like, "Oh, this is an interesting take on boundaries." I was like, "No, I'm telling on myself."
Yeah. Right.
I was very much so. I'm the boss. Who do you think you are telling me no? Oh my god! Like who? Oh my, what? Ew! Ew!
Yeah.
I had been, Liz, you laugh, but it's true. I mean, I wrote the words.
Yeah.
But I just thought I was all of that because of what? Money and power? Gross. And I was really just slowly decaying.
Mhm.
I was not becoming a good
Yeah.
person. And so, thank God that mirror got held up, and I was like, oh, this is not
Yeah.
good. This is no good. So I'm very, very passionate about people just taking a beat, the
Mhm.
power of pause, just take a pause and figure out who's making the decision. Is it your ego? And sometimes you may say, I don't care. I won't,
Mhm.
Right.
but at least do it with sound mind.
Right. Take inventory.
Right.
Do it with sound mind.
Well, this kind of, with our last couple of minutes, which I'm really sad about, but this is making it's occurring to me that the battle when you sit down, or my battle, I should speak for myself, when I sit down at the desk is often getting myself to be open to this channel,
Oh yeah.
when the words start writing themselves, versus I want to make everything sound really good. I want to win book awards and reviews, and I want everyone to like me. No, I want the channel to be open so that I'm experiencing that incredible experience of flow.
Yeah.
And given how open you are about your faith and the importance of God in your life,
Yeah.
what is that? How do you bring your faith into the writing practice? And do you experience that same kind of contrast? There's like Bethany and the ego and then God coming in. Like, how does that work for you?
Um, sure. So I am the type of person where I always say people will experience my faith in my writing, not in my bio.
Mm, yeah.
So I write. And in order to do that, I have to write authentically. So I just pour it out, and because I lived so confined as an executive, right? Because when you become a vice president or an SVP, you have to sign, 30 pages of I will not tell anyone anything, confidentiality and all the things. So you're locked. Your voice is locked. Everything is trapped. Um, for all the right reasons and some of the wrong reasons. And so I lived that way for so long in business that I'm just kind of like, I'm telling it all,
Mhm.
because the why behind it is I want everyone to experience unbridled freedom. I don't, and how can I tell you to do that if I'm not doing that? And if
Mhm.
I don't want to share it, then I won't write it. So yeah, I write about my divorce. You can talk to me about my divorce. I write about my kids. You can talk to me about my kids. Um, I always think it's problematic when people start writing about things and they're like, "Ah, it's off limits." Well, then why'd you write about it?
Right.
Right? There's some inauthenticity there.
Mhm.
So that's, I think I'm answering your question.
Mhm.
So God, faith and God shows up because that's just me. It's woven into my very being, and therefore it's in my fingers.
Mm.
I would just love to know on our way out, is poetry still a regular part of your writing practice? Yeah.
It is. It is. I write poetry. I Not right now. In this particular, like the last couple of weeks, but usually I will write a poem a
Wow.
day.
Okay.
Mm.
Yeah. So I can, and when I'm really in the groove, I can just sit and write poetry all day, whether or not it makes any sense or the
Mhm.
structure. Um, we had, I would like for my future books, though they are nonfiction, to have poetry books accompany
Ooh,
them.
I love
Um, so, that's just, hey, putting that out
it.
there.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, so that's a great segue into what are you working on next, and when is your podcast coming out? Because you need one. I'm gonna just put that out there.
I actually just guest hosted a friend's podcast, and I'm getting all these DMs. They're like, "Is this a soft launch for your podcast?" I'm like, "No." I am currently working on a pitch for a second manuscript.
Great.
So I am doing that. I'm, committing to writing. I've started a Substack.
Great.
I'm late to the party, to the Substack party, but and it's, so I'm doing that. It's called What's the So What. So those are the projects, and then I'm traveling and speaking. So
Mm.
business conferences and self help conferences, all of those things. So
Mm.
that's where I'm spending my time, but I'm leaning all in to the writing. But on occasion, I do some HR consulting
Okay.
because people always need. No one likes HR, and they always need an HR person to like come in and be like, "Can you fix this?" And I'm like, "I can. Yes, I can, and I can do it very quickly, and I don't need Chat GPT."
You're the Olivia Pope of HR? Is that
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah.
I will solve your problem, and I will solve it very quickly, uh, and then I will go home and move on and move on with my life. Yes, I will wash my hands of
Perfect.
it.
Well, thank you so much for lending us a bit of your time. We know that you have a busy schedule. It was
Yes.
incredible to talk to you. In addition to the Substack, Bethany, could you tell people just where to find you online, out in the world, anything?
You can find me at
Okay.
bethanyricks.com. That's my website, and all the things are there, or my IG handle, which is Bethany Ricks.
Your
No
IG
A.
is awesome. Yes.
Oh, thank
And
you so much.
yes, and we'll have all of that info in the show notes. And please let us know when your second manuscript becomes a book and we can have you back on. It was such a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you
Thank
guys so
you.
much. This was wonderful. This is definitely one of my favorites so far, for sure.
Oh,
This was great.
thank you. Well, again, everyone needs to check you out, read the book, Face Forward, and we will have you on again. I am not exaggerating. I had all of these questions and I got to none of them because this show is so wonderful. We just have a conversation.
I
But
love that.
thank you. And I'll just let everyone know that Imposter Hour with Liz and Greg is created and hosted by us, Elizabeth Keenan and Greg Wands. The show is produced and edited by Bookwild Collective founder Kate Herget. And Scott Leeds composed our original theme music, and Steve Luoma designed our logo.
And you can find us on IG at Imposter Hour Podcast and online at imposterhour.com. Thanks for tuning in.